You know that feeling? Your chest tightens, you pull in a breath, and it doesn't come in all the way. Millions of people fix this with a tiny device. One press, one breath, and in seconds, they're breathing normal again. But have you ever actually stopped to think about what comes out of that little canister when you press down? Before I show you what almost nobody knows about that tiny gadget people use every single day, hit subscribe because this is one of the most surprising stories I've ever told. Back in the early 1900s, a writer named Marcel Proust spent years locked inside a bedroom lined with cork. He'd had severe asthma since he was a kid. Struggling to breathe wasn't an occasional thing for him. It was daily life. When the attacks hit, he'd burn a special powder right there in the room and let the smoke fill the air around him. Other times, he'd smoke a cigarette his own doctor prescribed against asthma. Yes, you heard that right. A cigarette prescribed as medicine. Both the powder and the cigarette were made from a plant called stramonium, also known as Jimson weed or thorn apple. And here's the strange part. It actually worked. It really did open up his airways. The problem is that inhaling smoke also drags in substances that quietly damage the lungs over time. Proust was trading one problem for another, and he had no idea. He wasn't the only one either. For decades, doctors sold this kind of smoke treatment as a legitimate cure for shortness of breath. Today, nobody needs to fill a room with smoke to breathe better. There's a device small enough to fit in the palm of your hand that solves the same problem in seconds, with zero smoke involved. But I promise you, there's a part of this story almost nobody ever told you. When you press down on an inhaler, it looks like a little puff of smoke comes out, kind of like hairspray. But it's not smoke. It's a cloud of medicine broken down into particles so small that most of them are actually invisible to your eye. Some inhalers store that medicine in a pressurized liquid and fire it out in one quick burst. Others pack it as a dry powder that only turns into a cloud when you pull air in hard enough on your own. And there's a third kind that turns liquid medicine into a fine mist using vibration. Three completely different engineering solutions to the exact same job. Get medicine deep into your chest. And here's the part that changes everything. The device itself has no idea exactly where that medicine is going to end up inside your lungs. Physics decides that. Not you, not the inhaler, physics. The size of each particle, the speed it leaves the device at, even how hard you're pulling air in. All of it changes the exact path that medicine takes once it's inside you. A particle that's too big slams into the first thing it hits, your throat, or the very first branches of your airway. A particle that's small enough rides the airflow and travels much deeper, all the way down near the tiny sacs where oxygen actually crosses into your blood. Scientists now run computer simulations that track the paths of millions of these particles through 3D models of human lungs, just to figure out exactly where each size of particle tends to land. Now go back to that plant Proust was burning without understanding a single thing about the chemistry involved. Stramonium contains a compound that blocks specific nerve signals, the exact same signals that tell the muscle wrapped around your airways to clamp shut. Proust, with zero scientific knowledge, was inhaling a molecule that did almost exactly what modern asthma medicine still does today. The difference is that science didn't stop there. First, researchers figured out which compound in the plant was actually doing the work. Then they isolated it. Then they learned to manufacture it in a lab, with no plant, no smoke, no guesswork. It kept getting more and more precise, decade after decade. And something else has shifted in just the last few years. For a long time, doctors treated asthma like it was always the same disease. Chest tightens, you use your relief inhaler, problem solved. But we now know that relying only on that kind of inhaler without anything treating the inflammation underneath can actually be dangerous. You feel better in the moment, but whatever triggered your airways to close in the first place is still sitting there waiting for the next attack. Medicine has also discovered something even stranger. Asthma isn't one disease. It's several completely different diseases that happen to produce the same symptom. In some people, it's the immune system overreacting to specific triggers. In others, the cause is something else entirely. There's also a close relative of these conditions, chronic bronchitis and emphysema, together known as COPD, that leaves people gasping for air through a totally different path. The tiny sacs in the lungs responsible for oxygen exchange slowly rupture, usually after years of breathing smoke or irritating particles. Because of all this, entirely new categories of medicine have shown up. Instead of just relaxing the airway muscles, Some of them go after one specific molecule inside the immune system and block only that. Researchers have developed antibody treatments for certain severe asthma cases, some designed to be given as rarely as once every 6 months. And for people dealing with the COPD version, there's now a single inhaler that can carry 3 different medications at once, each one attacking the disease from a different angle. Think about that for a second. Proust had to fill an entire room with smoke, over and over, almost every single day, just to try to breathe. Today, some people manage part of a severe asthma condition with one single treatment every 6 months. That gap is enormous. And the ordinary inhaler is still evolving too. Digital versions now exist that track when you used it, how many times, and even what your breathing pattern looked like in that exact moment, saving all of it to show your doctor later. One recent study found that simply knowing you were being tracked helped people keep their asthma under control for an entire year. But not everything in this story is progress. Some spray inhalers rely on a pressurized gas to push the medicine out. The same basic idea as an aerosol hairspray can. And that gas carries a climate impact most people have never once considered. You press it, you see a tiny puff, and it never crosses your mind that it's carrying a chemical that does real damage once it's out there in the atmosphere. That's exactly why several companies are now racing to replace that gas with versions that leave a much smaller footprint. More than 260 million people worldwide live with asthma, and hundreds of millions more deal with the slow, COPD version of the same struggle. That's roughly the entire population of a massive country, depending on a pocket-sized device just to breathe normally every single day. So next time you see someone use an inhaler, or you use your own, think about everything that had to happen for that little device to exist. Over 100 years of people trying to figure out how to put the right substance in exactly the right place inside your lungs. A problem that started with one man locked in a smoke-filled room and ended up fitting inside something the size of your hand, ready to work in seconds. If you made it this far, you already know we love digging up stories like this one. Subscribe, hit the bell, and come find out with us what's hiding behind the most ordinary things in your everyday life. The obvious only looks obvious until you find out that little puff coming out of your inhaler isn't smoke at all. It's an army of calculated particles built to land exactly where your lungs are silently asking for help.